Good evening, and good fall season to you all. My name is SANDOR IRONROPE. I'm a Titan Lakota from the Pine Ridge Agency, here to share perspectives. This conference here entitled Psychedelic Perspectives. As indigenous people, you know, we've learned a lot from indigenous languages. And my folks, bless their soul, bless their spirit. These are where I come from. A time ago, and still today, we have come a long ways as far as indigenous rights, indigenous existence. And certainly in New York, I've experienced quite a few ethnicities with some challenges and history. My mom, my dad's uncle, Chief Lone Bear, on my mom's side, Chief American Horse and Chief High Hawk. Here, give you a visual of where I come from. This is my dad and his brothers, Peter and Eugene. My dad is in the middle. World War II and Korea. Serving in World War II and Korea, and yet not really authorized to practice your way of life until 1978. You know, 1978. And this is me carrying on at Camp Lejeune earlier this year to share a little bit. History is wonderful, and I continue to learn about the history, and history enriches myself, and here as well as New York and Manhattan having a history here, tribal history, you know. So many respects to our indigenous tribes that once inhabited this area prior to development here. We talk about medicine, you know, indigenous worldviews, indigenous perspectives. If you close your eyes and squeeze it real tight, you'll see circles. You'll see circles among circles. Circles and circles. Circles. That's what we see, circles. Our circle, I'm a circle, you are a circle. Circles interconnecting. Circles and circles amongst the vast circle of Mother Earth. Indigenous perspectives, naturalistic perspectives, intruded by colonialism, trying to annihilate us as a people because we were deemed a problem at one point in time. For development, manifest destiny. Have we all heard that term? Manifest destiny, we've all heard that. And what about the doctrine of discovery? We've all heard that as well. So when we think of indigenous people, indigenous to the land, blessed with a language, a tongue, tashpa tanka otoahe, tashpa tanka otoahe, the Big Apple here. Yushki awachianka pelo. Mitakwipi. I'm glad to meet you all, my relatives. For Lakota people, Lakota is friendship. Okolya, friendship. Misunderstood, and why our warrior societies fought because of this encroachment. Protecting original family and homeland because of this encroachment coming. When we look at different tribes, we were given a certain boundary to abide by the United States government. 1851 Fort Laramie Horse Treaty, 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, which gave us the boundaries of the east bank of the Missouri River to the Teton Mountains and north of the Platte River, encompassing these states known as Nebraska, Wyoming, South Dakota, and North Dakota. Original treaty territory, inclusive of the Black Hills of South Dakota. Still, we have not seen any justification for taking that land. And yet we have these movements that are fighting for our rights to exist, fighting for original homeland and territory. you know. So most of you may know Mount Rushmore, right? Mount Rushmore, originally the six grandfathers, a sacred site. So indigenous perspectives, a naturalistic world, mitakwe oyase, everything is connected, everything. Takushkoshko is something, the energy force that science likes to research, including researching indigenous people. That's something else. But Takushkoshko is something that moves. You all have a life force inside of you. Takushkoshko. And this life force exists in everything, and it's interconnected to everything. So indigenous perspectives, as my grandparents, relative kinship is important. We are all related. Mitakwe oyase, we are all related. When indigenous people greet a larger crowd, they'll share their hand to you. It's almost like this, that I don't have a weapon in my hand. They'll share like this. In a friendly way, they go like this, hand signals. My relatives, they would say, you know, yuha, all of you, yuha mitakupi, you know. So the way we view things is that we are all related, interconnected, and all gathered by Unchimaka, Mother Earth, for what she provides for us. What she provides for us. And as a spiritual being, having a human experience, we don't know how to be a relative to each other. We've gone apart from that. And when you look at medicine, it's a bond that comes together for goodness or for not so goodness. A bond created as a medicine. And when you all create a bond, you're creating medicine, because you all are medicine. You all have the ability to manifest this spiritual aura within yourself, you know, from your mind to become a walking medicine. And so we are all related, but we haven't established a kinship with one another to have that responsibility in kinship. We are all related. Mitakwe oyase, we are all related. And so this mindset is what indigenous people originally need to reteach because of colonialism, because of Western education, balancing our perspective in Western education. So we're all related. Wakpe oyate, wamakashka oyate, zinkala oyate, the bird nation, the plant nation, everything is nation-to-nation relationship. So in respects, reciprocity exists in nature because the seasons come back, right? We're in the fall season. So everything came back. Reciprocity, giving. In indigenous societies, in most indigenous societies, we will make an offering for something. Before we even take something, we're going to ask the plant life. And not everybody can do it, but certain individuals, respected individuals that know the plant life and know their medicinal properties, to be able to talk to them. And when Westerners came over, they said this individual was talking to the plant. The DSM-4 or maybe the DSM-3 at that time could diagnose him. But here we are talking, asking permission, asking for help. We're asking for help. And we're going to leave an offering here before we take. So we're always giving first before we receive anything. Now this world is a little bit different, where we'd rather just take or feel entitled because we want its medicinal properties, you know. So in a sense, we are talking about what it means to be indigenous. And we are also talking about relationships. Relationships, it's no different what relationships are, because in indigenous worldview, Chanku Luta Oganamaani, I am walking the red road, the spiritual road. And most cultures have a name for their spiritual road. And we are supposed to honor Mother Earth. We are supposed to watch our steps because somebody else is going to watch behind our steps. We are supposed to be in that frame of mind. Our mindset is more of the natural world, natural perspective, maybe thinking more from the right brain than the left brain. There could be some debate about left and right brain, But rightful relationships, to be indigenous is that worldview, the cosmology, from what is sacred on the top is sacred on the bottom. And there are different analogies with indigenous lodges. For us is a teepee, tikche, and there are many analogies to this, but it's a representation of a tiwahe, a home. And in the symbolic meaning, from what I've learned from my mom, my sisters, my uncles, my dads, this lodge represents a home. These poles represent the woman, is the backbone of the family. The covering represents this male figure that protects and provides. These stakes that hold this lodge down represent our children, our grandchildren that hold this foundation together. These flaps that guide this smoke from this prayerful fire that provides for us, it guides us, our grandparents guiding us. And so what is sacred from this vortex coming together as a family unit here and coming back out to the universe? Symbolism in Native American culture, you will find that frequently everywhere, because there is a meaning to what we're doing and how we walk inside of a teepee. I've traveled extensively from south to north to east to west amongst different tribes, and tribal people walk in a certain different way. Certainly the Rivadica people of Mexico walk counterclockwise, and we walk clockwise, So there is a way to enter the lodge, when you come inside of a home. And so Tate Topa, there's 7 directions to us in indigenous perspective, 7 directions. Here, 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 and here, yourself. 7 directions for us. Our perspective in relationships in regards to this is always wocheke, prayer, wohala, respect, waonshala, compassion, wachang tukunaka, generosity, wohitika, fortitude. Wotakuye is kinship, very important kinship. Then hence becomes woksape, which is knowledge. You have experience to have that knowledge. But in indigenous world views, kinship is really important. If you say somebody's name, we all have Western names. And although my name could be Hungarian, I'm a full-blooded Lakota, Malakota. Oyate Yoshkipi Remye, that's me. But to address somebody, and this colonialism happened, and I can't say that enough because that's where I come from. Historical trauma embedded in me. A survival of trauma is what we are. We have, not to get sidetracked, but we have an inherent right to remember where we come from. My grandma and grandpa suffered in such a way for me to be here and to share our perspective, because it was forbidden. We were forbidden to be who we were. Indian policies. When you understand Indian policy, you will understand where I'm coming from. The Battle of Little Bighorn, June 26, 1876. Wounded Knee, December 29, 1890. And so my mom, grandparents kind of have that survival mode from Wounded Knee. But when we're talking about indigenous perspectives, I can't express that enough, that relatives, relation, and kinship is so important to your worldview. The worldview and how we see things and how we do things. Because it's an interbalance that was interrupted. And that interruption in colonialism got us to where we're at right now. And if you don't believe global warming is happening, then you must need thicker glasses or thicker feelers, because the creek that I reside by is dwindling. And my belief for my grandchildren is that we have to be proactive in how we do things. And it may seem like it doesn't matter, but it does matter individually, because we all are not going to live forever. Every one of us in this room is going to leave something. The tools that we leave for our children are very important. Rightful relationships, interacting with different communities. Trust, establishing trust. Indigenous communities have a distrust with the whole system. Why? We just explained why. Briefly. Why do we have that distrust? Again, because they're going to take everything. You're going to take everything without asking. You're not going to put back, and you're going to profit off of it. And eventually that ecosystem is going to dwindle and not exist anymore for my children or my grandchildren. So how do we come to terms with that? That reciprocity is real, that what you do should be in respect to nature. Rightful relationships, So here we are today sharing a little bit from indigenous perspectives in regarding peyote. Pejuta, Oniawaka, Shama, different terms on how to recognize this, different terms. You all have classified it in Schedule 1 substance. I don't mean you all, but I mean the system. And the term psychedelic, nothing bad about, psychedelic. But when we as indigenous people hear psychedelics, remember the 50s and 60s, you know what happened there? In Woodstock. Different people not knowing how to handle it. No container. What was missing from them? Elderly people, experienced people. How to do something in a way. So over time, indigenous perspectives have relied on this medicine during colonialism, because during a time of, it was the church's policy to eradicate us. It was United States policy to civilize us. And that's what I'm talking about. We were in an era of dire straits. Children were taken from their home, stripped from the home. And when I start talking about that, I get a little emotional and tense, because there were a lot of children's graves that were just recognized not too long ago in Canada. And when you think of your own child, you think of that. You think of that incident right there, what happened. We weren't good enough, and we had to be civilized, and we couldn't speak your language, so we're going to teach you English, which has no substance to it. There's no substance to English. But here I am, explaining to you in English. But this medicine it helped us revive ourselves. Imagine that. Imagine you being stripped of everything that you had, and you all different tribes. And how we understood each other as different tribes was a lot of sign language, sign language, a lot of interpretations. People, Ieska, those people that understood a different language could interpret that. But this medicine here, at the turn of the century, we were not allowed to practice who we are. And of course, that history turned into creating a Native American church. 1918, in our area, 1922. The only way that we could protect ourselves and practice and pray and be one with nature, be one with nature, was this medicine here. And so 1978 did not include this. 1994, many of our elderly people lobbied, gathered, and made it happen. So when we're talking about, indigenous practices, we're talking about, you have to really understand the history behind who we are and the biocultures that are behind these plants. Because if we don't understand it, we're going to go through the same history that we have been following. Well, this is entitled, yeah, this is good, take it. Yeah, okay. Is it okay if I take it? Yeah, take it. You're going to take it, And what are you going to leave? Or who is connected to that plant? Or which tribe is it here? Oh, there's no tribe here because we got rid of them all. Okay, let's take it. The mindset. It's the mindset that we are all connected. You have to remember, we are all connected. And your energy and what you carry can affect somebody, good or bad. Oh, you bump somebody along the elevator, or there's, hey, watch out, Oh, this guy must be having a bad day, Oh, excuse me, pardon me, I learned that in school. It worked pretty good today. Excuse me. Medicine, Pejuta. The world is medicine. The world is our medicine. In indigenous societies, we look at the elements. Water. Water is life. Yes, we were at Standing Rock. Yes, we care about water. Yes, some of you think you could drink oil. But reality, being mindful of water, the elements, earth, air. In indigenous societies, you will find that most of these elements exist in our ceremonies. Most of them exist in our ceremonies, and we'll do that. The connectivity of this medicine is in the southern Texas, So we made offerings in southern Texas. We have been blessed by a network of wonderful, like-minded individuals, non-native allies that helped us purchase some land and be able to start to learn to preserve it, protect it, and we have a long ways to go. We have a long ways to go, but certainly blessed by spiritual individuals that see the greater good in indigenous communities and wanting to help. So through that, IPCI has emerged, the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative, So when we look at medicine, integrating medicine, our way of life is not just on Sunday, that we go to church. It is a life way. It's embedded in who you are from the morning that you get up and make your prayer and just say your thank you when the sun goes down. Ideally, that's what we try to live by, and ideally, integrating our medicines, our medicines exist in our cosmology, in our daily existence. I've been amongst our Huicholi, Wivarica nation, and they live in the Sierras of Mexico, walking miles and miles to make an offering, walking, That's one thing I've, appreciated about New York. Everybody walks, everybody walks, But walking, and integrating our medicines in this society is a way of life. It is a way of life. And so when we look at, society and how this movement has gone beyond, there was no consent in some of these plant medicines by indigenous people, or was there? And when in regards to being inclusive of this sacrament medicine right here, there was no consent to include it in any, bill other than the federally amended bill 1978, 1994. So when you're talking about this, how do we share our indigenous perspective about consent? These biocultures are connected to indigenous people. There may be some United Nations Nagoya protocols to some of all of this that needs to be shared on a bigger platform. But responsibility and consent, medicines, the world needs healing, and we all need healing. And certainly I'm still healing myself. We are all healing in some certain way. But when different perspectives come in regards to plant medicines, there is one that we talk about sometimes, and we don't like to think about it, but there are companies that exist that are making synthetic mescaline, plant medicines. And this perspective is from an indigenous worldview. When all is related, we're all related, right? Could I get a yes? Yes. Okay, we're all related. Makes me feel better. And so when we're talking about indigenous perspectives in that relationship worldview, imagine. So we take a plant and we synthesize the molecules and extract it and whatnot and put it in a pill format and say, hey, here, the therapeutic model doesn't exist yet, but take one in the morning and take one in the evening. And if you wake up, call me in the morning. But I charged you for that. I charged you for it. In the worldview of relationship, this plant is our grandmother, it is our grandfather, it is our generations, our next generation. And for myself, I owe many gratitude to my parents. Why am I here? Because of my parents. Why am I here? Because of my grandparents. Why? Because they practice this way of life. They live this way of life, and they're no longer here. And so in a world that is consumeristic, linear in some sense, and wanting to profit off of everything, we have to say something out of respect for your grandparents. Out of respect for your mom and dad, you're going to say something here to share a perspective. You take the molecules and let's make it, and then we can have a therapeutic model, and then we could administer it. But there is other 50 alkaloids that are missing, and there's no fire. There's no circle of community that was created, because community is important. There's no container in it, and there was no elder in it. So you're going to administer something that you have really no clue about. And you're talking about indigenous people that have been practicing this way of life for eons. And if we are in a do no harm approach, you may be missing something because you may be causing harm. You may be causing harm. It is a spiritual life that we live in. It is a spiritual life. I cannot emphasize that so much, because when I experienced my spirit leaving my body, there was no words for it. You have no words for it. And when your spirit comes back into your body, you are reborn. You are reborn. And so it is a spiritual life, and we have to balance the indigenous perspectives in this movement here, because economy, policy, all exist. And so we have to find these balancing. It's a balance. You all are in balance somewhere in your own spiritual body, Equilibrium, balance. Our ears help us balance. Internally, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. They're seeking the balance in here. So it's nothing new to all of us here, but it's just a reminder that we have to balance our perspectives in what we're doing. We want healing, and we also want to respect the ecosystem and the biocultures that exist today with these plant medicines here today. So when we're talking about, medicine practices, and what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, right? For relationships, the basic foundation is nothing new. Trust and ask. How do we ask? We ask with respect. Indigenous people, you'll find most of them, they hold this tobacco. There are different tobaccos grown in different regions because of its medicinal property. And so they always offer something. They have traditional tobaccos in different areas. So you do not offer something. In our way, when you ask for something, you give an offering first. And if they receive that offering, they'll be willing to listen to what you're saying, what you're asking. In this world here, I'll ask you first, without having it. I want. I'm entitled to this. I can take this. I want this. But we have to really slow down a little bit and look at the natural world and its movement, the fall season, So asking, how do we ask? I was given tobacco when I came here, and I was really like, wow, okay, I feel better, when somebody gave an offering of tobacco. It's something in the spirit and the mind that says, okay, I want you to do something. You've agreed, yes, I'm here, So I'm here in part because of the Indigenous Purity Conservation Initiative. I'm here in part because of the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund. I'm here in part of our Lakota people, indigenous people, whose voices have not been heard on any of these psychedelic platforms. Minimal. I'll give you 2 minutes to say what you want, and then that's it. But here today, I wanted to say thank you to Horizons for allowing indigenous voices to be here, to making me feel welcome to be here, I'm far away from home, and I feel a little bit comforted by, Buffalo Bill Wild West show, A time ago came through here, and some of my grandparents were a part of that, My grandpa, Sam Lone Bear, for one. So, rightful relationships, hand in hand, rightful relationships, trusting each other, building trust, giving before we ask, giving before we ask. Here you'll see that this teepee that I explained here is a vortex for some beautiful energy movement, because energy exists in everything. Energy, we're all moving energy. We are in ourselves a container of energy. And so it's always about energy. And our elements are always present in our ceremonies. And you will see that making offerings is very important, People don't want to really go out there in the rough areas, but you have to go in the rough areas, make an offering, People want it, a drive-up window and say, hey, I want a quick fix. Everything is a quick fix today. But you have to go back to the basics. And COVID did teach us that. So, existing as relationship building, looking at the future of what we have to do, creating a home site for some of our relatives to come over and to make offerings here, And South Texas, this is existing in South Texas, And this is to heal a broken system that didn't allow us to originally harvest our own medicine. You have to make your offering. And the way that we have been doing things, because of Texas DPS, because of DEA, we weren't allowed to make our own offering. So here IPCI exists to reconnect our people and our generations to the spiritual offering, because it's an exchange of energy. Why do we pray over the water? Because the water hears us. The water hears us, and its molecules form to that prayer. So, with that in mind, I hope that I've shared a little bit with you here today. There's a lot to share, and more than happy to oblige some questions here with you all, but thankful to each and every one of our workers here at Horizons and all the presentations that have existed. And thank you, Bia Labate, for being here in presence, and Sutton King for the introduction once again. So thank you all for listening.
As I said, we are going to do a 15-minute question and answer. If you have not submitted a question, please scan the barcode on the back of your badge. I see a lot of questions coming in already, but before we get into that, I just want to say makwawen and yako, Sandor, for your knowledge and grace and sharing today, your cultural ways of life and being. We talked about, backstage, appreciation versus appropriation. Can we talk more about what that means to you in respect to the psychedelic renaissance and the difference between that of appreciation and appropriation?
Yeah, certainly. I think that, in my younger years growing up in a off-the-reservation school, there was a mascot that was our high school mascot, and it still exists today as Indians, and so all along throughout society we've had these mascot issues, that kind of give general society an imagery of it's okay to, in a sense, when people say, I'm respecting your culture by bringing you a mascot, but respecting our culture goes a little bit deeper, and so we find people, throughout society, not really understanding what that means to us. You'll see people wearing a headdress, different things that happen, and then we have appropriation, people with no ethnicity to really back up what they're doing or no history in doing things. So, these are real issues that we all have faced as indigenous tribes, and so when we look at appreciation, what does appreciation look like? Appreciation to me looks like when indigenous people are empowered to lead, and when they lead, when indigenous people lead, it's inclusive of community. And so people that are in community spaces, you become embedded in that community wherever these indigenous people reside, and they are allowed to lead. There are also benefits to being in community where you also reap the benefits of whatever that indigenous empowerment or movement is, so it's empowering indigenous communities to lead. And by being part of community, we can also, in a sense, respectfully benefit from whatever that movement may be. I hope I'm making some sense here.
Absolutely. You touched on just the collective being able to heal and having the right to doing that. What are some key takeaways folks in the audience can walk away with understanding what allyship means and how they can be allies to indigenous peoples in this so-called psychedelic renaissance?
I'd give props once again to Horizons for giving us space, because it's the inclusiveness of these issues, inclusiveness of it. We are all a part, and when we realize that indigenous people are connected to a plant or to a geographical area, they grew up there, they're stewards of this. They don't own it, but they have an experience with it. And so why aren't we asking, those elderly people that have what is equivalent to maybe 2 PhDs, experience with this plant here, and including them in the conversation about, is this appropriate or is this inappropriate? Inclusiveness is important, and I think that starts to build trust. I've been, fortunate enough to be speaking in different areas, and the only reason why I agreed to do it was because people needed to understand a little bit from indigenous perspectives. And as we continue, the doors are opening to different venues that we feel comfortable in and that we're being heard. So building that trusting relationship, I think, is really important. And that's what I see experiencing here.
Thank you. Going to some of the questions that the audiences have submitted, one being, what do Western non-Indigenous people commonly misunderstand about trust and relationship building with Indigenous communities? Can you speak on that?
What do they misunderstand?
What do they misunderstand about trust?
Well, I think that the encroachment of Westerners, for one, was really historical and generational. And so when we're talking about reservations, some of us view these reservations as, prison camps. there is a historical feel of, you have to live on this piece of land, and that was all that you could live on. And so when you're talking about, trust building, I think just really understanding Indian policy in general gives a broader perspective about how do we go about building trust. And for me, when I've experienced and encountered, non-native people really sharing history, indigenous history, I feel like they know something, and my guard kind of comes down a little bit, and I feel like, okay, they understand a little bit of something. So it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think that just in general, Indian policies, in their respected areas, this area certainly has, indigenous people and history to it too.
Thank you. When attending a peyote ceremony, how can white people, the colonizing class, enter into the space with respect and leave something without taking?
Well, once again, that is, a tough question because, federal policy says that American indigenous federally recognized tribes. Now, it's not our system that we become federally recognized. This is the system that is in place right now, and 574 federally recognized tribes. Last year it was different, a few years ago it was different. So federal recognition, state tribes, tribes that aren't even recognized, exist. And so according to federal policy, we have indigenous people that are the stewards of this medicine that are federally recognized tribes. And so non-native people entering in that space, it may not be, received in such a way, that way because of this policy, because of how it came to be that federally recognized tribal members are stewards of the peyote sacrament, that way.
And this question that's just coming up right now is asking to explain to the white people in the room why indigenous peoples do not want them to use peyote. Can you expand more on what you've just shared now? Why is there that stance? Why do indigenous peoples feel that they have the right to use peyote?
There is a history behind peyote here in the United States. There's a history behind peyote in Mexico. There's indigenous allies that are unified in preservation of these ecosystems, of these plants, of these cactuses, of these medicines here. There's an ongoing challenge of tourism that is happening with these cultures and tribes, and the supply and demand is an issue with this medicine because people don't know how to respectfully make an offering, respectfully harvest it. I just want to experience this, but it's not the experience itself, it's the people. And people want to experience something of indigenous, but they don't want to learn about the indigenous tribes. And that's where we're at. Well, I want to learn, or I want to take your medicine, but I don't want to learn about you. That's the reality where we're at. So how do you change that mindset? We have to learn about the people first, and then we learn about, their way of life. And because that's what it is, it's just a way of life. It's not an experience that we say, I'm gonna have an experience on this day, and then I'm gonna call it good, It's a way of life, so.
Thank you. You talked a lot. You talked about making offerings. We've talked about appreciation versus appropriation. How can we make offerings in therapeutic spaces to honor Mother Earth in the medical model?
How do you make therapeutic offerings? From where you're at. I mean, it's important to learn where your culture comes from. I think learning who you are, your indigenous, ancestry.com is available to everybody. I'll give you the link after. But really learning your background and culture it gives you, a complete sense of who you are, and to really understand your grandparents and where they come from, and then to appreciate indigenous cultures in that matter. So really. So
peyote. We know that indigenous peoples face, disproportionate health burdens when it comes to chronic illness. How have you seen peyote begin supporting the healing of your indigenous communities when it comes to chronic health, mental health disparities, and such on?
Well, I think that it's a continuum of healing that indigenous people have with their ceremonies, and peyote ceremonies are no different. Indigenous people have endured many atrocities that are generational, and some generations may not recognize their behaviors. But in the sense of containers around ceremony, ceremonial leaders ourselves on the reservation are mindful of reteaching protocol, reteaching values, cultural values, and the purpose of ceremonies and why we're doing these ceremonies to our younger generation, even within our own tribes, to reiterate the value of a certain plant, a certain movement of ceremony itself, So we're constantly reteaching even our own, for that matter.
Thank you. Last question. A lot of us are doing work with various medicines. If there was one piece of wisdom you would want us to carry into our next ceremony, what would it be?
One message to carry
into their next ceremony as they're working with various medicines.
There's so much to moving slower, and nature has a movement within itself that, we want something yesterday. We want it yesterday because the world is traveling at light speed. And when we travel at light speed, we miss things. We missed respect. We miss consent. We miss, if I do this, how would this impact the greater whole? When the pebble drops in the water, the ripples go out, and it will eventually impact everything. So what I do is going to impact my community, my family, my community, and the broader people. What are we doing that we can move a little bit slower, and be more mindful to each other as communities? Because life, and this is nothing new, life is a prayer. Life is a prayerful journey. And so by moving slow, we have that realization that we have to do things appropriately now while we have a chance. And being mindful in doing that, we're not going to take anything that we've acquired in this world to the next world. We're not going to, So being mindful of what we leave here is very important.
Right. Thank you.
Is that the end of the questions?
We have 2 more minutes. I just wanted to ask, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to expand on, or that you'd like to share that's maybe come up for you?
I just want to share a song, The songs that carry us from my home site to this place, the songs carry us. And, in this song here, it is a memory of our grandparents. It's a thought of our grandparents and the atrocities that they've had to endure for us to be here. You can never forget it, because we have a generational responsibility to us, our grandparents, our parents, So in rendering this song here, think about your grandparents. Think about where you come from. Think about what it is that we're all going to collectively do to ensure that our grandchildren have a better future than us. Our grandchildren, because why we do these things is because of our grandchildren. There's these little children pulling at your pants leg, wanting something. And your tracks, they see your tracks, and they're going to follow your tracks, So with that in mind, just rendering a song to carry us all in a good way this season here. Well, think about those things as I render the song. Hey, yo hey hey yo hey yo hey yo ro hey yo way yo hey way hey yo hey ya hey yo ro hey yo way yo hey way hey ya yo hey hey yo way yo hey yo ro hey yo way yo hey way hey ya yo hey hey yo way yo hey yo ro hey yo Mitakwe oyase all my relations. Aho.